mic's on? Are we on? Okay, thank you. Well, welcome to so many wonderful people on this very, very cold January night. Thank you for coming out tonight. Pretty brave people. Happy New Year, everyone, and may you enjoy good health and prosperity and lots of happiness in the new year. Let's move onward and forward so we can get home to our fireplaces.
Good.
There, Joe, was the meeting posted?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Are there any citizens that would like to address the board this evening? Okay, we do have an audience, but nobody wants to talk to us. Okay, we need to have approval of the minutes.
I move approval.
It's been moved and seconded. Mary Jo, I noted that in the minutes, on the second page, it was noted right above letter E that the abeyance program would return in January as an action item on the Curriculum and Instruction Committee agenda, and it's not on the agenda tonight. So could you please make a correction of that or clarification of that? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, all those in favor, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 4-0. Thank you very much. Moving forward then, we have a Bright Lights tonight, and we have the Waukesha One update. Ryan, would you like to introduce that, please?
Good evening. Tonight for our Bright Lights presentation, we have three people that will be sharing out some of the updates of the Waukesha One program. We have Brian Yearling, Wendy Liska, and Laura Bush. They put together a short presentation, as we hope will be followed by some lively discussion with some exciting things that have happened. In addition, just as a little invitation postcard is on the desk here tonight. The Waukesha One Conference, which will be held on January 23rd, will be touched on in this presentation, but the save a date card is on here as well.
You know, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's the WASB convention.
It is.
And some of us go on Wednesday and Thursday, but whatever, thank
This is
you.
a Friday.
We may make some adjustments to our personal schedules, but thank you for that. It sounds like something very valuable.
And we'll see some details in just a second, so
Okay.
I think they're going to take it away.
Well, we thank you all for having us here this evening and giving us a chance to give you a little bit of an update on what has been happening with our Waukesha One and our rollout of devices in our schools.
Would you please introduce your committee?
Oh, I'm Wendy Liska, Instructional Technology Coordinator, primarily focused on elementary. This is Laura Bush. She is a half-time Instructional Technology Coordinator, also focusing on elementary. And Brian Yearling is our Instructional Technology Coordinator, focused on secondary.
So those at home.
Thank you. Welcome to all of you.
So we just want to start off by, on behalf of all of the staff and students who've received these devices and have yet to receive the devices, we just want to say thank you for your ongoing and continued commitment and support of the Waukesha One program. Here we have a group of students that just received their devices, and boy, when they take those out of the box, it is like Christmas every single day that we do that. And the excitement just continues to build as we see some of the amazing things that they are doing with their iPads. So thank you for your commitment and support.
At this point, we'd like to do just a quick update on where we are in that wave rollout process that you have heard about probably at some point in time. We have completed our Wave 3 student rollouts, so those first 3 waves all now currently have iPads in the hands of our students. Our Wave 4 students at Rose Glen Higher and Meadowbrook are anxiously awaiting their rollout in the 1st of February, and Hadfield and Lowell will be next fall. Their staff are getting their devices and learning how to use them and apply them and get comfortable with them before that student rollout piece. I think one of the things when we talk about Waukesha One, it's really important to realize that we have 4 schools that were in that first wave that are now in their 2nd year of implementation and probably a little further along that growth pattern and the understanding of the technology and how to apply it in their classroom. And our Wave 2 and 3 schools really are just hitting that first year, or now in this case first semester for many of our Wave 3 schools. in their classrooms. So as we talk about tonight some of the growth and some of the things that we are seeing, it really is still a very new project and very much a baby in its making at this point in time. One of the things that we are seeing already, though, is that power of access. We often relate this to, we had all of our students on one bus kind of headed one direction, and it didn't really matter where they were. We had students who were really ahead of schedule. We had students who were just kind of exploring things. We had students who were right on track, and we had students who really needed some extra help and direction. But we all had them on one bus kind of moving forward together. And that has changed for us with the power of that technology. We're very much able to take our students from where they are to where we want them to go, have them in different modes of transportation, may it be at that point in time, and really get the students exactly what they need to make that move forward. And we are seeing a lot of this happening in our classrooms already. One of the things that we take as kind of a key point to this is our Blackboard, which is our learning management system. It allows teachers to post content available to students 24/7, 365 days a year. We're seeing some tremendous growth from last fall to this fall in terms of the number of courses that are available and the number of times that we have students and staff logging in to access those particular courses. That means our curriculum is much more accessible than it has ever been to our students.
Brian and Wendy and I have been able to spend quite a bit of time in classrooms seeing the iPads in practice, and we've been witnessing some really amazing things. Having this mobile device, teachers are able to move around the classroom. They're able to get down with the students and do some conferring with them and take notes on their device and have access to that all the time. Again, that just-in-time delivery of resources using things such as Blackboard that Wendy mentioned, Google Apps, and being able to share and collaborate with tools like AirDrop. The iPads have allowed for a lot of different types of learning environments and technology in places that maybe you wouldn't normally see them. Students are bringing their iPads to the gym and using them in Phi-Ed. They're bringing them to music class and just creating projects that before in environments weren't necessarily capable. Teachers are also able to do a variety of formative assessments to see really where their kids are at any time during the day and be able to plan for their instruction that's coming up next, for the next day, for the next week, and really know where their students are always at. iPads have also allowed an unleashing of creativity for our students. We have students collaborating across grade levels, across schools, from elementary to middle to high school. We have students in kindergarten all the way through 12th grade creating iMovie book trailers. We have students who are using apps like Explain Everything to explain their problem-solving strategies. Students are becoming authors and analyzers as they create books in Book Creator. We have students working together at the elementary, middle, and high school level using green screen apps to create newscast productions.
Can I just ask, when these students are collaborating, do they also get to meet with each other?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, but because you made it sound like it was from a number of different schools and different grades.
One
So
of
I didn't know if you-
the picture on the bottom corner is actually some students from Blair went over to Butler.
Okay.
This is their newscast production room. So Blair just started a newscast production. So we went over there to see how they use their space, and they taught us how to use some of the tools and how to use the iMovie app as well.
Okay, thank you.
So one of the things that we believe is happening and we see happening is that the introduction of the devices and the concepts behind Waukesha One are starting to impact the perception of both students and teachers, and also starting to impact the practice and changing the practice in some ways. So what we do each spring and fall is we deliver a perceptual data survey where teachers are just asked to respond to the questions. We understand that it's their perception on those things, but when we started to do this, it was actually fall of 2012. So it was a year before students actually started to have their devices. And in fall of 2012, you can see that in the left-hand column there. Then you'll see in the right-hand column our data from fall of this year. So this was completed in October, and that's the update. I've got a lot of data that we could start to look at, but we just wanted to pick some of them that kind of tell you a little bit about how people feel about the data, and that's the perception piece. So our school has good technology and digital resources. Our school leaders support risk-taking and using technology for teaching and learning. Risk-taking is a really important piece, and that's how you ultimately grow and try new things. It also means different things to each teacher who reads that. So risk-taking is an operative term that each person will internalize and decide. School leaders support me in my classroom technology use, and then the introduction of a tool like Google Apps, we do this also for Blackboard, and we're starting to do this for literacy tools as well, has transformed my instructional practice. And so I think the key piece here, although we're proud of the percentage growth that we're seeing, the key piece is in blue and in green, you see actual people, 139 people in fall of 2012 had a positive, either agree or strongly agree to the idea that they had good technology and digital resources. Now, fall 2014, 537 of those teachers agree to that. So we think that's an important piece because when you start to believe, have the perception that the resources are good, that I have support, that the people around me believe in what I'm doing and allow me to take some chances, you're more likely to begin using that every day and trying new things with it, which is really the key to all of this. So a little bit further on this, so that's that perception piece in the data. I just wanted to kind of explain, the next slide is a little bit, can be confusing if you don't have context, so just really quickly. What you're looking at here, there are 6 areas that we rate. General practices happens to be one of them, and this really focuses on what they do with the technology. And so what we are really looking at is a growth model for professional development and for professional practice. In that far left-hand blue, you see entry, and really to kind of help you understand what entry it is, if I hand somebody a new piece of technology, something they've not used before, they start an entry no matter what their skill level is, right? They try to figure out what to do with it, they get comfortable with it, they often try to do what they've always done with it. And so that's the entry level piece that we're going to look at. In the next slide, we're going to take a look at some entry only. I'm not reporting out on substitution or augmentation. Our goal, though, ultimately is to move out of entry and to move toward modification. That's really what we're trying to do. We don't believe anybody is going to transform overnight. We know that people are going to go through a process of growth as they adapt technology and adopt it. So that's what I really want you to kind of understand as we look at the next piece of this. So this is that data for entry in fall of 2012. You see that in the left-hand column. And then our most recent fall of 2014. Normally, when you see things go down, that's not always a good thing. But remember, our goal is to get people out of entry and moving on to more practical, useful, purposeful ways of using technology. So we're actually celebrating the growth that we're seeing here by seeing people leave that entry field. It means they're starting to get comfortable with the technology. On the left-hand side, you'll see the different categories. I said there are 6 of them. So using technology for assessment, using technology for communication, using technology for productivity or media. So those are the categories, and we're seeing growth in all of those areas, obviously some greater than others.
Could I ask you, when you say you're seeing growth, how could you can define that? Because I'm not seeing that.
I guess by growth, we mean that people are getting beyond the place of just looking at the technology and uncertain of what to do with it. And now, as you, if you can go back to the slide previous. So as you get onto the augmentation and modification, that's where technology begins to actually impact instructional practice and student achievement at the modification level. So when we get beyond the point of saying, I'm not sure what to do with the technology, which is entry and substitution, we now can start thinking differently about what we're going to do with the technology, what we're going to have kids doing. And so when I say growth, that's what we really mean by that is kind of that comfort level that starts to come with it, and then a change in practice ultimately.
And the growth really is that we're taking people out of entry and moving them down that scale towards the higher levels of use.
I hear what you're saying. I think it's just that next chart is really very
Yeah, it looks like it's
unhelpful. So, I mean, I appreciate what
to show the
you're saying.
pluses of the other.
Right, but it's not capturing what you're verbally telling
And
us.
totally, you know, when
all.
you start looking at this data, what happens is you see people leaving one area, so they were in augmentation, now they move to modification, but the people who are in substitution will move into augmentation, and your numbers grow in augmentation. So you were at 15 and now you're at 20, and that seems like, well, is that good, is that bad, or we'll see numbers go down. So what we just really want you to see is in the year that people have had access to this, they're starting to move past this level of discomfort to starting to figure out what they're doing with it in a large percentage there. So.
Brian, could you give
Yeah.
an example of what substitution would look like, augmentation would look like, modification and redefinition.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
We can
English
put
teacher,
audience.
I'm an English teacher, right? So, as an English teacher, substitution would be, I used to have kids handwrite their papers.
Okay.
Now I have them handwrite, or actually word process that. The process really hasn't changed that much, but now I'm using technology to do something. But it really is what we've always done, right? And so I ask, why is that better than handwriting it? And those are the kinds of questions that'll come at substitution. When we move to augmentation, I might realize that there's a built-in spell checker here. There is a built-in formatting piece here. I might even be able to use one of those, one of the templates that exist to make my writing better. So I start to figure out how to do little things with it that, are features built into it. I still haven't changed, though, at augmentation what kids actually do, right? They're still just writing a paper. They're just doing some. When we get to modification, I can start thinking a little bit differently about it. Let's say I'm having a kid writing this paper, and I really just want them to focus on the intro paragraph. And I really just want them to kind of get in on a key piece of that. So what we can do is we can take the template that exists in Word or Pages or whatever. We can I'm not going to worry about formatting at all, and I'm just going to have the kids work on that part first as the first lesson. So now, instead of writing a whole paper, we're going to write a specific part. We're going to get better at that. And by the way, it happens to be a Google Apps or Google document. And so now we can do some revision. I can look at their first draft versus their third draft electronically and start to have them do some reflection on that. Where before I would have written on the paper, right? Nice job, I like what you've done here, Now we can look at growth over time, so that would be a change. Redefinition might be, we're actually going to start looking at writing with kids from across the district or across the world. I'm going to get perspectives from other people. Redefinition, we don't aim to live in redefinition. It's doing things you could never have done without the technology, or it would have been really difficult. So our goal, even though we're aiming at growth, our goal is ultimately to live in that modification place where the technology starts to get teachers thinking differently about what they're doing with the technology and what they're having kids do with the technology. Yeah. That's good. Okay. You can go through this. So this is just a visual rep of that.
Okay. One of the things that we feel has been kind of transformative through all of this is really the opportunity for leading and sharing within our district and beyond. When we started this program, we had each school select a vanguard team. And over time, many of those teams have changed, and the membership has kind of been very fluid as it's moved through. But that team really took on the leadership of helping their staff move forward and start to use that technology. We've seen absolutely fabulous things happening in the buildings with those teachers really taking on leadership, both with parents, with their own staff, and with the students in the building, and building this program and providing that leadership within their building itself. The other piece of that is kind of an outcome of that is that that leadership has really taken on sharing with other schools in our district. As we said in the beginning with our rollout plan, we're really in all different places right now. From those who have been really immersed in one-to-one to those who have some of the devices in their building and are getting used to using them. So our very own Waukesha One Conference coming up here on January 23rd is really a celebration of that, in that we have a couple of keynotes coming in from beyond, but all of the other learning sessions are our staff sharing with our staff. We have over 100 structured learning sessions and some very more open sessions that will be going on that are being taught by our staff members to the other staff within our district. And I think that's a pretty impressive piece to be able to say we have the capacity to do that now in our district. And I said one of the things for us as we sat there scheduling out the sessions was looking at the titles and the content that are going to be presented. There wasn't a session that I would say, even with my years of experience in technology, I wouldn't want to attend or have interest in. It is a great lineup, and we encourage you to come and join us for that. The other piece with that is that we really have found ourselves, with the way we have implemented and put things in place, ahead of other districts. We weren't necessarily the first ones on the bandwagon saying we're going to select iPads or we're going one-to-one. That had been happening all throughout the nation as we got on board and started that. And yet we find ourselves very frequently being contacted by other school districts who are coming in to see what it is that we are doing in our classrooms and learn from our staff. And I would say, based on some of the recent visits, to learn from our students, because they've spent a lot more time talking with our students about what they were doing, and we're amazed at what even our youngest students were able to do. And that, for us, I think, is a really impressive piece, that even though we might not have been the first ones in there, that what we are doing really is seen as cutting-edge work. We are presenting at a lot of the conferences in the area and also having others come to see what we are doing.
So that's kind of the long and short of it. Again, just a thank you for the opportunity to stand in front of you and talk about this piece of it. We're very excited about the work.
I think we have a few
Thank you.
questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Baumgarten.
Comment, and, excuse me, comment and a question. First of all, to your last point here, Wendy and staff, I continue to be very, very pleased with the way we have rolled this out over the years, and the use of the Vanguard approach to share good learning experiences that we've had in other schools, either anecdotally or by reading and hearing from other districts that decided they would do it all like that. We didn't. We did it the right way, and I have to compliment all of us for having taken it on. Even though, yes, some kids had to wait 3 or 4 years to get their stuff, it's not really hurting them significantly at all. So, again, very well done. The question I have, way back at the beginning, you talked about how the Blackboard process has worked or expanded. Could you share with us a little bit about how that is used by the kids?
Absolutely. Basically, Blackboard is a learning management system, so it allows teachers to post content online in a really organized fashion. Some schools have a 3rd grade class, and all of the 3rd grade students are in it. Some have Mrs. Liska's classroom, and just my students would be in there doing different things. So it can be a shared process in some of our buildings. In others, it's very much an individualized for each teacher. At our secondary level, almost every single one of our classes is now on Blackboard. So their content is posted and available to students. So students log in with an account and are able to access any of the curriculum materials that the teacher has posted there. It also allows the possibility of discussion boards, collaborative work going on inside the system, so it's behind the password protected site. The thing that we see as a real advantage besides what the students are doing with it is every parent in our district has a login. So I can log in to Blackboard and I could see all of the classes or courses my high schooler is taking, the middle schooler is taking, and any elementary student is taking. And I can pop in and out and see what those assignments are, what the calendar says is due. I can look at what the assignment was that they need to be working on. Or even at our primary level, lots of links to websites and things that we use at school that are great for them to carry over at home.
So that if a student is confused at the end of the day on what was presented in Brian's class or something like that, he or she can go back and kind of go through it again?
Absolutely. And for our learners who need to see things more than once, it really provides them easy access to be able to do that and have that review process.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
It seems that parents ask questions about the amount of time or percentage of time that students may or may not spend in different content areas using the computers. Could you just address that a little bit? Because I think it needs to be clarified how we're using these, because I think some people, we certainly don't want people to think that a computer has replaced a teacher, because that could never happen. But could you just address that a little bit?
So one of the teachers that came up to me, I would say about 2 weeks ago, at Waukesha North, had kind of this aha moment. So they're moving into their 2nd year.
Okay.
And he said one of the things that he and other teachers have been talking about lately is the fact that when the technology first came along, the concept or the thought was this technology is going to be what we're expected to do every day, all the time. Like, this is what class is going to look like. This is what learning is going to look like. And so for that teacher, his aha moment and what the other teachers are starting to see is that isn't the expectation at all, that the right tool for the job is really what the focal point of the work is. And as we have done our walkthroughs in different classes, it's interesting to see that students will opt sometimes for the paper version of things, sometimes for the digital version of things, and we see that at all levels. And so the reality is, this is not a stand in front of or sit in front of a screen kind of instruction. It becomes often more collaborative as kids are both working in the same document or same project on their device and having a conversation. At West High School saw a really interesting scenario where they had 6 iPads, 6 students, 6 Chromebooks, and some of the richest conversation I've heard out of an AP class, really talking about, and they had, now they had all these different resources open, and it was really just driving the conversation. So I think it's very fair to say we have seen more technology use, obviously, but it really doesn't drive the instruction in the day-to-day. And every teacher has those days when it's face-to-face instruction, iPads put away, and they're developing methods for having kids put those
I
devices
just
away.
needed to have you clarify that it hasn't replaced directed instruction.
At all. Yeah,
Okay.
not at all.
I think it helps make our students more efficient. I think it helps make our teachers more efficient. And I think it allows them to have some higher quality time together because they're not dealing with some of those other tasks at that same time.
One more question. Because so much information and content is available on technology, I mean, it's just endless. Do we still have some textbooks that children refer to? Could you address that?
Absolutely. We have classrooms that have had text for years and still are using their textbooks. I was in a first grade classroom today and they still all have their book bins and they also have their iPad as a story choice as well. So certainly our materials have not flipped to be 100% digital or anything of that sort. They are still using the quality materials that have been available.
So, for example, in elementary school, do we have a math textbook, or is pretty much the math online?
We have not used a math textbook in recent history.
Okay.
The stuff is a teacher resource that is then applied
Okay.
out for students to use and use those pieces. So
Okay.
some of it is digital and available to them that way, but other is just classroom materials.
Okay.
And that's really where the Blackboard piece comes in. A lot of
Okay.
those resources will be housed there, so that becomes your access to a lot of those resources.
Well, just so people understand that a textbook isn't necessarily the most important piece of information or tool that students use because of the vast amount of information that's out there. But what really drives instruction is our standards and our goals, et cetera. And however it is that we access information to complete them, it doesn't necessarily have to be one textbook like it used to be. Is that correct?
The best resource for the best
The best
teaching of that
resource,
standard.
okay. Just wanted to make sure that that was understood. Okay. Any other questions? Dr. Langill?
Thank you for being here, and I guess it's a conundrum that, I think all of us look at. Certainly, I'm interested in it, and you are, I'm sure, as much or more than I. And I mentioned, I think in December, that amazing book, The Innovators, which asked the question, can computers think? And we just saw, maybe you have, or if you haven't, I recommend it highly, a movie called The Imitation Game, which asks the same question from really the father of computers, Alan Turing. So I guess my question, based on that preface, Brian, is when I hear you talking about, let's say, the opening paragraph, with your students for an essay and so forth, does the computer just expedite them responding, or as you use the computers and the iPads, is there a qualitative difference in what material they're getting that you couldn't give them, saying, okay, this is what a good opening paragraph does, yours isn't doing it, can you work on it? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So how does it aid you in that?
Well, so I'm thinking about a particular student that I had.
Okay.
His struggle was a writer's block when he saw his words on the page as he's typing it. He's rereading his text as he's going.
Right.
And so he's stopping and rereading. And in that case, the ability to just, because we're in a drafting stage and we just have to get some ideas on there, there's a microphone on that. I just want you to put your words on the paper at this point. We're
Okay.
going to go back and revise that later. There's a student who was going to write 2 or 3 paragraphs in the time, or sentences in the time that we're working. He's got a paragraph at least that we can start working from.
Okay.
And those are the kinds of aids that can help all, kids of all abilities.
Sure.
So that piece. Now, the same student who just isn't interested in writing today, it's not going to help. It's not going to do a lot in that case. But a teacher who can start to look at that, start using that and say, hey, I've noticed a trend here. every time I give you writing, you're really only writing 1 or 2. That was something I had a hard time doing in the paper and pencil version of that
Okay.
writing, right? So now I can go back and look at something called in Google Docs revision history and say, I notice that when you said you were doing all these edits, you really weren't. There was very little work that was being done. That changes the conversation
Okay.
as well. So I think those are the kinds of like additional pieces that can be
Right.
added. That's where the augmentative piece of this
Well,
comes
that
in.
really helps, because I think that's to Wendy's point about the expediting of it, as opposed to really a qualitative difference. I mean, obviously, the message you give them is probably the same, but then you can interact with them in a much more expedited way as far as,
And I go back to that paper sample and say, how many times when something was written on the side, were you just done? Where with the computer, I can tuck in there, I can delete a sentence, I can edit a sentence. And teachers are having really rich conversations with their students in the little box on the side about stuff all along. So it's not when I've handed my finished rough draft that I'm getting feedback. I'm getting feedback on a really regular basis that allows me to develop my writing. So when I am done, I have a piece I'm extremely proud of and have had that help in building along the way.
thank you, that helps a lot, thank you.
The questions that I ask usually are questions that are representative of non-educators. So I think, and they pay very close attention to what's going on in our schools. For example, when you want a student to solve a problem and you want the student to illustrate, not just 5 times 6, 30, but when you want a student to illustrate, and you can't write on the computer, you still have to use paper and pencil, or could you explain how that's done?
So an example of that, traditionally a teacher had done, problem sets, they'd given 15 problems to do in a math classroom, transformed the directions, right? So the directions were, I just want you to work on 2 of them, and using an app called Explain Everything.
Yes.
I want you to, so the students had a whiteboard first to
Okay.
practice their Explain Everything.
Okay.
Went through those problems multiple times, because when you get to the Explain Everything, it's the writing, but it's also your thinking.
Right.
You auditorily, you're recording that.
And it's illustrating,
And
right?
it's illustrated at the
Okay.
same time, right? So you
Okay.
had students who previously maybe wouldn't have spent enough time on that 15 problem set, are now practicing 2 problems
Yes.
over and over again,
Good.
and have to explain their thinking. And the teacher now knows what their thought process is. So yeah, that's those kinds of apps can really change the way that you look at and assess that learning as you
So
go.
they use the whiteboards then alongside the computer?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Just
Mr.
a
McCaffrey?
quick comment, great presentation. Bill and I have dealt with this for hours. And this presentation was much more riveting than my board reports. But you really, I mean. You think? Yeah, a little bit. But you really put it in layman's terms fantastically. Everybody, I think, understands where we're headed. Another comment would be, Waukesha 1 is just not iPads, it's Blackboard, it's Google Apps, it's the teacher, it's the students, it's everything together. So just to think that it's just a device sitting on a desk is completely incorrect. Great job.
Thank you.
Ms. Franchek?
And I just wanted to add, Barbara, you can write on these. So they have a
On the
stylus.
iPad, you can write?
So they have a stylus and a screen, and it's
Didn't
just
know
on
that.
there. So just want
You have to show me how to do that. Thank you. I didn't know that. See, I'm in the, entry stage?
We can move you along.
But I use it a lot. I really do, but I'm in the entry stage. Maybe you're all advanced, but I'm not.
Oh, wait,
Okay, it looks like our questions are completed. And we want to thank you very much for making this so understandable to us and the community. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, so then, board members, again, save the date, January 23rd. Looks like it will be a very interesting day for someone like myself at the entry level to participate in some of those sessions. Okay, next on the agenda, we have one action item tonight, one discussion item, and 2 information items. The first action item is a course name change, art, metal, and jewelry. Mr. Crone, will you please take us into that?
Sure. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ron Rivard and Allie Olson. And as you can see by our handout tonight, we're looking at a name change as it's been a little bit misleading. And we've also attached in the document the UBD that really has not changed. It's the current operating one from what we currently do, so it's just technicality in the terms. But they can
Okay.
explain some of the reasons why.
Great. Welcome.
Good evening. Mr. Crone did a great job of outlining why we wanted to just bring this forward. It's more of an update in a name than it is a change in content. In fact, it is not a change in content at all. It's just the updating of a name to be more representative of the work that the students are doing in the class.
Yeah, there's not much to it. That's exactly what it is. There's the term jewelry and then art metals and jewelry has been used, and jewelry is just part of art metals. And it's always been misleading, and it's basically came from feedback of students throughout the last, 4 years I've been at South, but over the past 10 years or so, the other teacher that I work closely with was very concerned about it because the students that walk in expect to sit down and bead jewelry onto a string. And art metals is much more in fact, often not even beading at all. So the content, the course description, it all still aligned, the UBD the same. It's just very misleading. Our students don't walk in the door understanding what the course is about by just the name.
Okay. Mr. Baumgart?
I don't have any problem with what they're saying, but I'm confused the way this was presented here. Are we, will the new course, what is the current course name? I'm looking at our yellow thing, it's confusing me.
Yeah, I believe it's
the-
jewelry and art metals.
Now,
Yeah,
and what do you want it to be?
art metals.
Just art metal?
Correct.
Okay, so we're gonna drop the jewelry out of it.
Right, to clarify,
great.
like, yeah, it would be like saying painting and watercolor is the course.
Okay.
And it's like repeating what it is.
That helps
And then
clarify
there's-
what was going on here on this piece of paper, so.
Yeah, students are walking in and some of them expect it to be more of like a craft when it's a fine art and not, there's soldering involved and casting and a much more metal work than jewelry.
This is so straightforward, I would just like to move for the approval of the change of the name to simply Art Metals.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it looks like there's some further discussion. Dr. Langill?
Well, I did just have a question looking at the syllabus, because maybe the syllabus was designed, I guess, earlier, but you're talking about wearable, decorative, and then it says enduring understandings, jewelry and body ornament are one of humanity's earliest forms of expression. Are you gonna leave that all in?
Yeah, part of it is wearable jewelry. Part of the course is, but
Right.
it's not half of the course. And
I know,
that's
it just
what-
seems like you can modify that, because it
Yeah.
does look like that's written for the jewelry.
Yeah, and if you see that's actually included in here, is the curriculum, where is it? The teacher that is also very concerned about this is gonna do some curriculum work to revise the UBDs and update some curriculum this year to align that better, because, yeah, that is
Okay,
correct.
and I think it'd be good if we could see that, because we've certainly made a motion already to, approve the change in name, and that sounds good. And it's certainly a broader approach, art metals, than just jewelry. But again, I mean, you look at where it says art history. In this course, the student will learn how other artists have used jewelry throughout history. So obviously that all needs to be changed.
Well, it's not being taken away, the wearable art part of it.
No, but you need to supplement that, I
Yes,
guess, because
yes.
what you're doing is a much broader approach to using metals to create art, and it isn't just wearable art and adornment,
Yeah.
right?
It's difficult when it goes from the levels, level 1 to 2, so it's the enduring understanding start to build off of there and stuff, so, yes.
Okay, so that'll be revised.
Yeah, that was the plan for the rest of the year, is to,
Okay.
there's been a lot of work, I think, ignored in the fine
You know,
arts
upon
curriculum area.
adaptation, would you share that with us? Because I think Dr. Langill raises a very, very important point, because I did note that too, that we're talking about art metals, and we're talking about, expanding the experiences for these students other than jewelry, but yet when we get to the art history part, we're talking about jewelry, and I think, you need to just adapt that statement so that there's an understanding of how broad, the course is.
Exactly, and I think that's the purpose of the summer curriculum work,
Okay.
is to make those revisions match what the
Okay.
course title is.
Okay, well then when you're finished, and in place, then, show that to us again so that we have a clear understanding, okay?
Absolutely.
I have some real basic questions. I've seen some student projects over the years, and, of course, I'm always very impressed with what Waukesha students do. They're just, they're brilliant and so creative. However, what kind of metals are we using? I'm sure we're not using gold and silver because we couldn't afford to use those things, but what are we using?
Well, copper is the cheapest one that
Okay.
kids will most be using, but there's all sorts of things. There's using wire, aluminum wire for sculpture wire.
Okay.
They'll do recyclable projects with actually aluminum cans that then they'll start to attach together. So it's just a beginning. Nickel.
You didn't by any chance, this is interesting, you didn't by any chance happen to catch 60 Minutes last night, did you?
No, I did that.
Well, there was a very interesting piece on there, how someone melts aluminum in a very simple way, and they use, the pieces, to remelt and use for jewelry or all kinds of other things. But it was a very, I thought, cost-effective way to recycle aluminum cans and use it for other purposes. It was very interesting.
Yeah,
So-
I think it's difficult because it's a very low melting point. So then when you're trying to do more sculptural like things, it's very hard to.
It was amazing. What do they typically use for the jewelry besides ceramic?
To create the jewelry?
Yeah,
It's like
Metal-wise.
sheets of metal that they're then sawing or,
like the copper and.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was just wondering, about the cost of that stuff. I'm assuming that that's just an ordinary district cost, that there's no cost for materials when you take that course, is there?
All the art courses have a fee.
Oh, there is a fee?
Yeah.
Okay. Based on the type of materials?
Yeah.
Okay. So what would be a typical fee for this course?
I can't speak exactly that, but I think all the high school art ones are $40. I don't think they differ too much. Not specific. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
It's
Do we help students that,
Yeah. Yes.
pardon me?
It's in the fees list.
It's in the fees list, okay. All right. Any other questions, or, all right, then, all those in favor, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, Mary Jo. Well, thank you, it's very interesting, and, I'm sure we wouldn't mind having a piece of that lovely jewelry.
Go to the spring show,
that
and
was
kids
a
are always
bribe.
selling their stuff itself.
If you had said that before, that would have been a bribe. so-
After it's done.
Just kidding.
Thank you.
Very careful.
Thank you. Okay, next item is the middle school elective wheel. Mr. Crone, you take us into that, please.
All right. Jason Sadowski, principal of Butler Middle School, is here tonight, representing part of this conversation. I'll be a part of it as well. And what we're hoping to open up a discussion on is really the current middle level wheel. We've provided three very simplistic pieces of paper or attachments that go with this. So basically, the wheel in its current existence is pretty well established in our middle schools. It's pretty well locked in.
Right.
And any thought to sort of change the offerings, to change the format, to offer different things, really becomes quite a challenge, especially when you're talking across 3 middle schools or a whole school, and it sort of unravels. So we're not here tonight to unravel it, but we are here to talk about an early discussion that we're looking at starting to unlock it. We have a couple of things we wanted to share as to maybe reasons why and things we're thinking about. Wanted to also share a couple of foundational pieces that might go into some of the planning. And then from there, we'd sort of propose where this might carry on to for larger discussions.
Okay.
For the most part, I'm going to let Jason get into this for a little bit. For the attachments, I'll just go over quick. We'll talk. One of the first page of the yellow, on the yellow, is basically our current wheel is founded in sort of an exploratory philosophy. We're going to offer 6th graders and 7th graders a chance to be exposed to a couple of different courses, or a 6-week wheel, which would include art or music or tech ed or foreign language or business, and so it has and we have some of those details on the front. One of the things we're looking at is looking at, instead of having that be the current main driver would be, is there a way that we could start to look at offering more personalized learning, more student choice? The wheel is sort of, has a lot of exposure, but doesn't have a lot of choice in it. Maybe an opportunity for greater skill development and sustainability, or some more rigorous learning. Some of the reasons this comes up, and we'll dive into this in just a little bit, is really that we have students that are coming to Butler, Les Paul, and Horning from dual language schools, from integrated arts schools, from STEM schools, or with a passion for music, or with a passion to learn something that technically they're waiting 3 years to have time to have longer exposure to, where they may already be asking for, do we have to be in this wheel, or can I be in music longer, or. So there's some of the initial questions, and there really hasn't been a lot of wiggle room for the most part in how we would do that, and so we're looking at offering some things. The second page, and we'll dive into this a little bit more as well, this was from 2010-11. When the sixth grade moved to the middle school, there were some early discussions about what experience would sixth graders and then seventh graders and eighth graders get. And one of the early discussions was, oh, here's how the wheel could look. The bullet points on the 2010-11 side represent some of the philosophy that was trying to be put in place at that time. When Jason and I looked at it in some of the planning, we haven't actually realized much of that philosophy. For example, there really wasn't a whole lot of personalization. There wasn't a whole lot of flexibility. It was sort of, you're in the wheel, and these are the courses you'll get and the time that you'll get them. So what we were looking at is coming up with what would be some of the real proposed principles that if we were going to start to unlock this, that the 14, 15 that we would say. And we started to talk again about the terms pathway or some student choice, but yet at the same time experience the exposure piece. And then lastly, just for the handouts, and I'm going to let Jason kind of dive into some of the details. The last handout is we just have an example of the current, this was on your desk when you got here, just an example of the current middle school schedule, how it currently looks. We're hoping to do tonight is open the discussion to hear from the different points of view and some different storylines regarding this. We're also looking at potentially moving forward with a small pilot of this with some of the students that are in Quest, which is the school within a school at Butler, and even possibly some of the schools, kids that are at Flight at Horning, because they are currently trying some flexible options. And so we were thinking that this might be a way to take a closer look to see if there's some value in this long-term for the entire middle schools here or for all the middle schools here in Waukesha. So that's my long intro, but maybe pause.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are we gonna get a definition of how it works now?
Yeah. I'm gonna let Jason dive right into exactly how it works.
Okay.
I just want to make
Right
sure,
now.
right,
Okay,
exactly,
right now.
after my long intro.
Because I don't wanna hear how it's gonna work unless I know
How it is today.
how it works right now.
Right, good question.
Well, this doesn't tell me, this doesn't tell me anything. It tells me somebody knows how to highlight stuff. Alrighty, the wheel I'm dumbfounded by the wheel.
Pretty much, Ryan
Makes things go.
gave you the purpose of
Yeah.
why we're here and why we're having the discussion here. To answer your question on the details of the wheel, each section is a 6-week course over the course of 36 weeks.
Okay.
So for instance, a student may start off in 6th grade, they'll take an introduction to Spanish. They may then go to introduction to French. They may then go to drawing and painting. And then they would go to a tech ed class and then typing class. And I'm missing one, health and development class. So that would be 6 weeks of each of those courses. What we've been finding then too is between field trips, between various change of schedules, band and choir asks for students to be pulled out of these electives to do a joint band because we have so many band members they want it together. It turns out to be not 30 days of instruction, but down to 25, 26 days of instruction. So it's really not even a true 6-week course.
Yeah, sure.
So that's where we kind of talked about the rigor, the sustainability of skills. 7th grade is very similar with some slight changes. So it'd be introduction 2 to Spanish, introduction 2 to French, a variation of the tech ed course. Then they go into the art and metals, jewelry kind of component. Business is when they talk about the career pathways. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later because that's a key component of this whole process. And then in family consumer, and then there's a family consumer ed one as well. So essentially what we're looking at is The problem with this is the student cannot deviate from that plan. We have currently at Butler, we have about a dozen students that we deviate because of various situations, but the only way to deviate for that is they have to retake one of the other courses. And we may do that for a student with cognitive disabilities, some of our students that, in the dual language program, instead of taking a Spanish course now, we do offer Avance, but we may, instead of them taking French, we may put them back in Spanish again, because sometimes behavior, because they're not interested in that, then they cause behavior problems. So we do some manipulations with that, but the only opportunities we have is for them to retake another wheel course, because there's no other course offered at that time for sixth graders or seventh graders. So those are some limitations that we have. And as you kind of see in the schedule that I showed you, is really like for sixth grade, third and fourth period are the only times electives are offered for them. So it really blocks in our time frame for that. And it really blocks in the teacher's schedule as well. So when we talk about trying to personalize pieces, trying to incorporate cross-curricular components, we're not able to do that with that isolation.
I'm just going to say quick, and on this schedule, then by showing that those 2 periods, because the wheel is running, it's also the only thing that's running. So if a student's looking to deviate, there's not another place to go, there aren't other offerings, nor can they access periods down here or periods down here. So that's part of when we say locked in, it's sort of locked in, students are locked into it, but this courses themselves are pretty locked into here's when they run and here's where they are, and it sort of has created some limitations of it.
And the other piece is when we have to offer the teachers need their prep time, so the core teachers are not available during that time because that is their prep time. I know some use it to help out in certain situations, but ideally there's just very limited. There's only one way to do a 6th and 7th grade schedule in these cases. The situations I showed you there, those are the only options that students have. So basically, there's 2 options for each grade level.
And that's
4
what?
options for each grade level.
Okay, and is Flex one of them, or that's what it will be?
No, Flex is just a course that we have for intervention and acceleration.
So where do you fit the music and?
The music is, music and Phi-Ed would be, like if you look on schedule, on the 6th grade schedule, if you look at student 1,
Yeah,
that student would have wheel 6 third period, and then Phi-Ed, and then opposite that music, 4th period.
Every other day.
Every other day, yeah, so the slash is every other day, or either that or
so these
semester.
boxes are periods of the day?
Correct.
Blocks, okay.
Correct.
Can I?
Yes, please.
First of all, flex, you defined in a way that's so alien to me, but flex was always foreign language exploration.
That's right.
That's not on the wheel.
Flex is now gym.
It's not part of the wheel or anything like that. It's a what we unofficially call a period, is what it is.
What period?
It's-
A what?
It's unofficially what we call it. It's kind of like a flexible study hall, I guess would be the best way to describe it. Or a learning center, flexible learning center.
Let's say somebody doesn't want to go to a learning center or study hall, can they take something substantive?
No, they can't.
Ooh,
That's
That's
that's what we're trying to unlock.
okay, good news. Also, then, if language isn't in there, you're saying language is somehow in this wheel 6?
Correct.
6 weeks of
6 weeks of a foreign language.
Spanish, 6 weeks of French, 6th grade, and then 6
Okay.
weeks of Spanish, 6 weeks of French in 7th grade.
Okay,
Yeah.
That is another concern of ours because of the model. There could be students that get 6 weeks of Spanish the first 6 weeks of school as a 6th grader, end up getting 6 weeks of Spanish almost a year and a half later. With, we're concerned with the way that it's exposure, and it goes back to that, it's exposure
yes,
or exploration,
yes.
but it isn't
Efficient.
it isn't efficient, it isn't designed the deep type of learning experience that we know we
Right.
would want, nor does it even provide, if a student came in and said, I want to dive in to learn this language,
Yeah.
it doesn't allow someone who
No.
may be passionate about that to immerse themselves in that over
Right.
a 3-year experience. So
And if we're
that's-
talking about these 6-week chunks, we're talking about 4 per year, is that correct?
Six.
Six.
Six
Okay,
per
so
year.
3 each semester roughly is what you're talking about, okay.
Correct.
But then for music, and I'm thinking, of course, here, band and orchestra, that really is watered down, isn't it?
Well, they are not part of the wheel, they actually go by, so
Well, it
six,
looks like it is.
no,
It's alternating.
it's all, it's for, so if I go back to student number one on,
Right.
for sixth grade,
Yep.
that third period that's highlighted, that first one,
It's hard, man.
that student only has wheel third period. Then on the fourth period, they either have, for the whole entire school year, they either have Phi Ed, one on A days, or music on B days. So it's every other day, so it's equivalent to a semester long
Well,
course.
that's not either or, if they have, okay, back up. What you just said is they either have something on an A day or something on a B day, but what you really mean is they have A and B, right?
Correct, correct.
Okay, so it's not either or, they have both. So that gets to my point, though, because if music there is, let's say, band and orchestra, then what we're talking about is out of 10 days, you get 5.
Correct.
Yeah, that's.
So
hard,
we've
yeah.
really watered that down.
We did.
And then we're sticking them in, and I hear you saying we're gonna change it, but then we're sticking them into a study hall, which a lot of the best students aren't gonna want at all. I mean, that, to them, a lot of that's just a big waste of time.
Very true.
So, I mean, so what you're telling us here is, this is bad, this is what we have, you're not telling us where we're going.
This is what we currently have, and
This is my question.
this is
Yeah,
what,
Want to know how it works?
yeah,
yeah, this is what we currently have, and
Yeah.
this is why we're opening up the discussion.
okay.
Mr. Baumgart.
Back to the same discussion. In the current environment, the kids have to take Spanish and French. 6 weeks of Spanish,
Right.
6 weeks of French. What about the kid that is coming in that's been through our dual language program for the first 5 years and is already beyond that level of
Right.
Spanish?
They could teach
They-
the class.
Currently for Spanish, we do have a course called Avance that is run, so they, instead of them going to that Spanish for 6 weeks, they go to that, of course, that's Avance
I
for
think
6
Dee
weeks.
talked about that.
Yeah.
Um, But they also then go into French and then everything
yeah.
else.
And we're also looking at establishing that same kind of two-way dual language program at one of our middle schools,
But then that would
which you'll be
become a
hearing
regular
about soon.
course.
Well, now, it's more than a course, but I mean, if you've been through, let's say, the Banting two-way dual language program, and you want to continue on that same track, we will be offering it at one of our middle schools, expecting next year, but, you know,
But
it's
then
still.
there would be no reason for them to be Spanish in that week.
No, exactly,
That-
right.
as-
But I
as-
mean, that is why we're in development of that program, so that it doesn't, so that they don't have to take, French along with that, if they're in that particular program. So that, it's still in development, but we expect that we can
I can see where
implement
we
that
are-
next year.
And if you look at the attendance feeder schools for Butler or any of our other middle schools, you have students coming from STEM schools, Hawthorne or Randall that would choose in there. You have students coming from Summit View with this integrated arts experience, or you have students coming in from a dual language program. And having any of those students automatically go into a wheel, think of a STEM student who's already had all of the Project Lead the Way courses.
Right.
Or
Very
as,
true.
again, that led us to, what are some other options? And then that led us to the conversation of what, when we went back to what the original design was, we're thinking, how do we get pathways? How do we personalize it? If students are coming in that have a passion for music, even our current models every other day, but there could be a way that we could put it in every day if you had something other than the wheel. If you had a student that came in that said, I love engineering, I want to take some of the Project Lead the Way courses or computer science, instead of having an exposure to it, those are some of the things we're trying to unlock.
Well,
and
how
that's
could you
what-
get it in every day?
you could change it into an elective. Instead of having a wheel that has no choice, we could change it into students allowing themselves to choose a pathway of interest.
So you would do away with the wheel?
We could do away with the wheel, and we could also still offer the wheel as an elective. If somebody wanted to be
Yes,
exposed to things,
yes.
they could be in it, if that was a
Uh-huh,
choice.
that I
But you
like.
could still have other offerings
Yeah,
if somebody came
I
in
like
with a desire to pursue something deeper.
And I'm sure there are students that want something deeper. I'm sure there are, coming
And,
from,
and keep in mind, the wheel was a very good idea 5-6 years ago when
Yes.
we made the transfer.
Yes.
Sixth grade from
Yes,
elementary
I
to middle
agree.
school. But with the evolution of our STEM program, our fine
Yes.
arts program,
our
our
bilingual
dual language
programs, yeah,
program,
yeah.
it's now time to,
Rethink.
update the middle schools to take advantage of those.
I agree. Ms. Ryanchek?
Thank you. What does our STEM Saratoga school have? Because my son Taylor right now takes I look at flex and I think that's gym, because I just hear I have flex gym today. So, I know that he has to take gym before school, he has to take Phi-Ed before school in order to take Spanish. So is he on this wheel? I should probably know.
Saratoga is a little bit different. Saratoga, because it's a STEM school, there wasn't as many pathways offered. It was, if you're going to be in a STEM school, you're going to have, so their electives, so to speak, are a pretty heavy dose of business and Project Lead the Way courses and art courses. Because families still had an interest in pursuing music or foreign language and Phi-Ed, there was still there's still a requirement for Phi-Ed. So I do know at STEM Saratoga, Dan Tuttle, the Phi-Ed teacher, and the students have found a way to offer the Phi-Ed credits in a flexible format, sometimes before school, sometimes after school, so that students still could keep additional pathways open. It's almost like a 0 hour at the high school where they were offering, because students want it all. And that was one of the challenges early on at the STEM school. I know because I was living it at the time, which was, we had to say it was a STEM school and we wanted to have a rich and deep STEM experience with the Project Lead the Way. If families are choosing STEM, they're choosing the STEM curriculum, so to speak. But we also knew that there was still some interest in having a rich experience in a foreign language or in a music, and so we found a flexible way to offer that. So it sounds like in your example, they decided I wanted these other options as well, so it required some additional work on the student's part to.
So they come in before school?
Yeah, the Phi-Ed teacher offers different flexible options for them to meet the requirements, which was part of the give and take for kids.
So there's no wheel at Saratoga?
No, there's not. And that was basically, and that was one of the early discussions when it started, is there was a lot of discussion to have that middle school have and offer all the same things as the other middle schools, and then it was sort of like, well, hold on.
Wait a minute, yeah.
Then we would just be one of the other middle
Right,
schools.
right.
It was, here's a STEM school, focused engineering curriculum, focused science curriculum, and that's where it couldn't offer that. And then again, families wanting other options and other pathways and other interests, that's where we came up with that concept of the flexible 0 hours to meet that requirement, to not close the door. And I think that's almost what's leading some of this discussion, which is this door seems pretty locked in. How can we offer some flexible options for kids to pursue a passion or an interest and not necessarily be told no, or you can't, or wait 2 more years?
But let me ask, because you used the word requirement, and again, my 2 children went through middle school a little while ago, but not only did they do the flex program differently, and it was called flex, but anyway, they never wanted to take a study hall because they thought that was a waste of time. So they weren't forced to. They could take substantive things. But there was a requirement, and I'm asking this if this is true now. They had to take some shops, so they had to build that bubble gum machine, and they had to do what we used to call home ec. I know it has different names. You're saying that's not true anymore?
Art has a 9-week requirement in 6th grade.
Okay.
And requirement-wise, if you can do the addition on our current 6-week model, we have art integrated into some other areas to meet that requirement. Currently,
Okay.
it's not a perfect fit. Also, Phi-Ed has a requirement,
Yep.
and music has a requirement in 6th
And that's
grade.
vocal music, really?
And it's any type of music, so usually it comes across as general music, chorus, band, or orchestra as a choice. So,
Oh, because that did not used to be the case. You used to have to take vocal, plus if you wanted to do band or orchestra. But now you don't, so that,
One out of the 4 areas.
oh, okay, so things have really opened up a lot, and no more bubble gum machines, and,
We still have tech ed.
we still have it.
but it's not
It's
required,
not a
apparently. It used to be required.
requirement.
The
Right.
kids
Well,
all
but
had to do that.
But right now, technically it is required
Oh.
because they're required to take it through the wheel.
It's not a state requirement, but kids are taking it.
Oh, so if it's not a state requirement, as a district, we don't have to require it.
Correct. The only thing we
So
would
we have
have,
that freedom.
the only thing that we would have to require is art in 6th grade, music in 6th grade, and Phi-Ed all 3
Phi-Ed,
years.
yeah.
Sure, no, and I understand that.
Those are the only 3.
But that's opened up a lot of opportunities, which leads me to my last question, and this would be, of course, me. But, you know, if you introduce them to Spanish, let's say they're not a dual language, great, maybe they want to go on in Spanish. That used to be the idea. You take, you know, French, German, Spanish, and then you're supposed to decide at the end of 7th grade. That's the way it was. Now we don't do German, but why don't we give them some Latin in there? Anybody thought about that?
Honestly, that I don't know the history behind that, but really that comes down to when a wheel is crafted, it drives a lot of staffing, it drives a lot of offerings, and there's a decision that's made on that. I do know a lot of other schools offer for everything from Latin to Mandarin to other languages, because If it's not required, you can run it then based off of out of interest versus requirement, and that's sort of what we're trying to move towards.
Don't you offer Chinese at STEM
y-
Saratoga?
Yeah, they did. I don't know if still
Did,
do. I
yeah.
just don't know.
Yeah. I was just thinking, since we're really gravitating toward the Romance languages, we're really, I mean, sad to say, but German is not doing real well lately,
Right.
whatever reason. But, you know, if they take French or Spanish, the Latin would be fabulous for
very
whichever one they
valuable.
want. Just
For
my
English.
commercial.
I
Okay.
agree. Mr. Baumgart?
Yeah, first of all, I actually have two different questions. Tech ed, it's not part of the wheel.
It is.
It is part of the wheel.
Correct.
So kids will get exposed to it.
Currently, students are exposed to it, both 6th and 7th grade
But they don't have to be.
for six
That's
weeks.
what you call engineering and technology?
Okay.
Okay, and what about the home ec part of things?
Same thing.
Same thing, okay.
Okay.
That's good, because it kind of leads to my other, I don't have a problem with unlocking the wheel. I think you've presented an issue that we need to talk about and need to get to. However, when we first began talking about the wheel, 4 or 5 years ago, whenever that was, one of the purposes of it is to expose kids to lots of things that they might not otherwise be exposed to. Now, if we open it up real far, are we causing some of our kids not to be exposed to something they should be exposed to? I don't have an answer for this. I don't even expect an answer, but I think it's a question we need to be careful of. The purpose of the wheel was the exposure and the exploration opportunities for kids that don't know they want to explore that area. I particularly look at the career connections piece of it.
And
Eventually, we've got to get kids to understand what different careers are, not just what dad does, that kind of a thing. So I don't want to lose the opportunity for a kid to explore something, maybe not that he, you know, I don't think I'd like that. Well, 6 weeks later, you can tell me that, you know?
And Bill, thank you for bringing up the career connections piece, because that is something that is, when we talk about kind of like after we have this initial discussion, that is a key component of our next step. Is the career pathway that is taught in 7th grade during that wheel piece. The idea is that is gonna be the focus of what drives the whole elective process.
Okay.
Because like you said, it's gonna be constituted as a pathway that students choose. It's not just gonna be, okay, what pathway do I want to choose? There's a process and some encouragement and even some assessment that students take to find that focus of what pathway they want to choose. And there's courses that they take that are aligned to that pathway. And that's something that can be aligned through the course of 3 years, all the way through 12th grade. So it's not just a middle school thing, it's all the way through 6 through 12, into the high school piece.
Thank you.
There's a couple other areas, because we're in early discussions in this, there's some other things that were floating around, because as you can see from the first pillar on this page, we knew that student exposure was a top priority.
Right,
And so
right.
we knew that there would be an area that was of importance, and it's still gonna be of importance. But we wanted to look at what would some other options be. We did in some initial discussions talk about, well, what kind of summer option between 5th and 6th grade transition-wise could we offer, even a summer school exposure type piece where students were contemplating that if they want to be a part of not a long 6-week wheel, but a quick 1 week exposure type thing to some of these pieces. We also talked about even possibly offering the wheel still in its current form, but people choosing into that, or even possibly could be things like at the first 9 weeks of middle school could be an exposure thing, but that also gets balanced out with the number of teachers that you see and getting connected to school. So another thought that came up in some of those discussions, none of these have gone farther than just one quick discussion, is how could some of the exposure pieces of those things tie into our currently existing standards and curriculum? What of that could turn into this, could come right into a math course? What of it could come right, and that's where we're trying to do a better job. When you're studying science, what careers are a part of the unit of study? What careers are a part of a unit of study inside of history? What careers and that might be a spot. But those are all preliminary, but that comes back to that deeper conversation is what is the purpose of some of these wheels or electives?
Why not have careers more in 8th grade? I
Yeah.
mean, kids in 7th grade, they're just,
They haven't got a clue.
they don't know what they want. I mean, some do, obviously, but a lot of them are just not, they don't even know what's out there.
High school, Ellen.
They don't know when they register for
Well,
college.
and what's the statistic? The kids who
That I
enter
know for
college,
sure.
let's say 4 year, college, the percentage that changed their major and their career path between freshman and senior year is like 70% or something.
It's terrible.
I mean, so when we say, learn about careers, I think that's all great, but
And it's really a K-12 conversation.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
And it
absolutely.
needs to be woven, and that's where a lot of the work is going, but at the same time, it's there.
yeah.
And I think that's one of those pieces that, and then, and it's funny, because you do get some students that change their major or not quite sure, but the other thing that we are seeing is that for as many that are changing their major, there's a lot of students that enter sixth grade with a pretty clear focus of what they want by the time they graduate high school. And that's in terms of which foreign language and how far they will go. That's in terms of a math class that they take in 6th or 7th grade that will roll into it. There's some new work out there about even the requirements. We brought this up at our last meeting, that a math course taught at middle school will now count as credit at
Yes,
high
I've seen
school if
that.
it's the same
Yeah.
course. So that's really changed the game for some students that were saying, I want Spanish 1 or Spanish 2 at a middle level. I want my Algebra 2 or geometry. And there's even now, with Project Lead the Way, on some of those engineering courses, some of those are coming in. There's a computer science one that's being introduced. It's a 3-year experience. And you come out with a computer science certificate. There's really not a reason that couldn't be introduced for students at a middle level, and they leave exhausting the entire curriculum in 3 years of middle school. And we know how tight the schedule is at the high school, students wanting to take extra courses. So we're seeing down the future that we want to be able to, I think, offer a menu like that, but we are trying to have an early discussion, which leads us to kind of the end point of this discussion,
Yes.
or one of the end points, which was with the new model at Quest, which is a multi-age model and a smaller group of students, and with the model at Flight, they've already had some scheduling challenges with, because of how it's locked in, and if you're titled a 6th grader in the wheel. So this year at Flight, they've dabbled with flex electives, sort of, flex, we're using the word flex all different generations here, but they've offered some flexibility in their electives this year, so that students could pursue an interest or a passion or integrate it a little bit more. That's an initial concept that we're looking to go forward with for next school year at Quest and Flight as we continue to study this on a large scale piece, provide some examples and some courses, and that's really kind of the initial spot that we ended our conversations with, because it needs a lot more discussion and
The
planning.
question, when will we see at least sort of a draft of this is where we think we might go?
We wanted to get this out and kind of making sure that this was something that was supported at first. We are meeting pretty much monthly on moving forward. The next step is to survey students and families on what their perspective of this, would be, and what their interest levels would be, and then kind of start moving forward based on some of that data.
So late spring, summer, next
Easily.
fall?
Probably next time you see me, at the very latest would be spring.
Oh, okay, so it's
It's
beginning
something
to,
that we're, like I said, if it's
okay, good.
we wanted to bring this discussion, making sure that we have the support. This is something that, we believe
Oh, I
in.
think it sounds like a
but
great change
sounds
to
like
make.
It
Yeah.
does.
So it sounds like the support, so, we feel like we want to be aggressive. I don't see, like he said, we won't be able to make a dramatic change for next year. But the focus then would be can we make the change for 16, 17?
Sure.
So did you say, Jason, we're gonna try some of this with a small group of students next semester?
We're looking at, not the start of 15, 16. We're looking at Quest, doing with Quest students and.
Starting when?
This school year of.
This school year, okay.
15, 16. School year 15, 16, we're gonna be starting with Quest. We're looking at starting with Quest and Flights, possibly Flight students.
Okay, so but not the rest of the school year?
Correct.
Okay. It amazes me we haven't discussed this for a long time, but that we wait until 6th grade for keyboarding. By that time, kids have already developed habits, and then we teach them or reteach them how to use the keyboard. It doesn't make sense to me. Could you tell me why we do that instead of doing it in elementary school? I think that's where it belongs, and
sorry,
we
I
used to do it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't tell. I don't know the history behind that.
History of keyboarding is complex. I think it has a direct correlation of
Obviously.
when computers were installed in schools, and then where it was, and then it also goes into, can students reach? There's a number of students whose fingers aren't and hands aren't big enough at a small age, but then the keyboard shrank and it used to be typewriter. And so there is some tools that have come in. I know that they teach some of it, but again, even on an iPad, the computer pops up. It's a very different feel than an
Oh, sure.
additional home row and
But
shifting.
on an iPad, aren't they supposed to technically have?
They do have it there, but you can also split the screen and do it with your thumbs, and more kids are doing that these days.
Oh, I know it. I don't see kids, my own kids, going like this. I see this or this.
Yeah.
And it just amazes me. But I know years ago when I was still in the school district, we used to do keyboarding, but then there was some kind of a discussion between business ed teachers and who was teaching it in the elementary school, and there was a conflict of interest, and so then it was just dropped. But now we're teaching kids keyboarding, but they're coming very adept already by sixth grade for starting in
They're
kindergarten.
not coming with proper skills, but
Well,
they're
no,
coming.
but
they're
try
knowing
and
how to-
change it.
Right, they're knowing how to
Yeah.
navigate the keyboard. And again, business ed was typically a secondary program. and
Absolutely.
You had no such thing as a business ed teacher licensed to teach elementary.
That's right.
So they just stayed away.
That's right.
And now, we have this
Right.
particular issue, so.
But boy, there's nothing harder in the world to do is change a habit. And they come. I see it with my own kids. Karen?
Thank you. So, if we know our current schedule is not working, why can't we pilot this last semester of this year with the Quest and Flight and then launch it next semester, next school year? Why does it have to take so long?
A lot of it has to do with the staffing that we
Sure.
currently have put in place, and communication with families. It would be a total change of the schedule, and there's just too many variables that we would upset and just not be prepared. Curriculum that we would teach the kids at this moment. Right now, our teachers are,
Be too quick of a job.
they're, to put another thing on there at this point in the game, I just don't feel comfortable doing that.
And why are we just piloting with a few kids? Why don't we just, if we know it's needed, why don't we just roll it out?
I think that's one of the reasons we want to bring it forward tonight, because the conversation could, I think right now, I think we're seeing that there's some support, and that could lead to, when we come back, maybe in a couple of months, a proposal for that. We want to look at it, we want to make sure we're covering all bases. There will be some concerns about this as well as you move forward, because the current mode of operation is the current mode of operation, and to start to change that, we'll have,
Midstream.
it needs some time for discussions and exchange and developing a vision for what that would look like for a music program, 6-8, and how offerings we could have. We'll need time for that. So if it's something I don't think we want to race into, but if from tonight's discussion, our next meeting, we'll get it on the calendar as quick as we can. And I do know there was some initial discussion on making some changes, but when we proposed tonight, well, let's try a couple of test pilots, that was sort of a cautious approach of trying some things and getting discussions going. But I think by all means, if the discussions take place and there gets to be some traction on this, we could come back and say, but it's a bit of a stretch knowing that students are, there's open houses already for middle schools. I know there's one tomorrow night where students are already seeing what they're being offered. So that might get in the way of
It's
September.
also a big enough change where I think we'd be more comfortable with the pilot. Typically,
Oh,
the programs that we've started with pilots have turned out to be very
Right.
successful, because we've been able to learn from
Can't jump into it.
some of the mistakes and some of the good things we've done. Even STEM, while that was started as two large schools, it took probably a good 2 years to really get to the
Get going.
place where they're at right now. So I don't know that I would be comfortable just going wholesale on this next fall without trying this out, see how it
Right.
works with
Right.
some,
And it
and
takes
there'll
a
be
while
some
to find a
trial and
Latin
error as we go
teacher.
too, so.
Yes, there's a far and few between.
Speaking of a stretch, Ryan, I went to the South High School Christmas concert, and it was just absolutely positively awesome. And what a stretch for those kids from middle school who have music every other day to this phenomenal orchestra and band program. It's quite a stretch for these kids. I don't know how they make the transition, but I just wish that we could do more in middle school and certainly elementary school. Amen.
Both, well, this could potentially be the start of that at middle school.
I hope so.
And again, we are continuing to work through that at
I
elementary.
hope so.
But again, given the curriculum requirements at elementary, you know, we're having to kind of figure out where that fits, so we could potentially have it
Yes.
often enough where,
Yes.
where,
Great.
you know, it works.
That's great. Okay, interesting.
Thank you.
Good luck. Now, will this ultimately be an action item, or not necessarily so?
We could, yes,
This, you know, it's a great change.
because right now it's
Great
pretty,
step.
it's required, it's written in
Okay,
with the experience.
great. Thank you very much, Jason. Interesting. Okay, our next item is a K-Math update. Ryan, want to introduce that?
Sure. At this time, Bob Antheline and Rose Palmer are going to be here tonight to discuss a little bit, just an informational item regarding our K-8 math update. And Rose is here. Dan is not here tonight as he's on the agenda.
No, good evening. This is more, it is, as it says, informational item. We had brought to you a little while ago that we were going through a review process and just kind of wanted to let you know where we were at. And that next month we will be bringing at least, probably most likely about a K-8 proposal for math to you, with some details and probably like an option one or a preferred option and A and B, just so we could kind of take a look at, because some of it will be cost, you know, we'll take a look at the costs of things. One of the things we did find going through this process is it is a year for a K-12 math review, at least on our schedule it is. But working with Dan and Rose and Ron, finding out it's taking a little bit more as far as when you get to the secondary level, you're looking at multiple courses. Where here we're looking at resources that can be used across more of a continuum of learning, you know, where kids are kind of moving all about, as opposed to we get to a spot where they're taking specifically like a geometry or an AP calculus. So Dan has been digging into with some of his team really what kind of resources, and he actually just had a couple meetings with some companies as far as what's out there right now that people might want to look at. So he's probably gonna be doing more exploratory with some of the secondary groups, where we're hoping to be more at a spot in the next couple of weeks to come forward with some recommendations to have some consistent resources, K-8. We did have about, 20 people, 25? 15.
How's your math?
My math? I gotta get out my computer to help me.
Oh, don't say that to me.
That's why I said
Rose
it.
knows how I feel about that.
But that kind of got an opportunity to go through resources that are currently being used and ones that get pretty high remarks as far as research behind them, and just kind of get a glimpse as to what are the pros and the cons. And about a board meeting or two ago, Rose and Dan kind of presented you with a math vision, and they all aligned the feedback within that vision to make sure it fits the view of the district and the view of the teachers in the math in the program. So nothing new was really reviewed, but at the same time, it was kind of taking a little bit deeper look at, okay, what are the benefits for students, what are the benefits for teachers, and what access points could we have? One of our big goals is to really be able to look at kids across schools and across grade levels and have some data points that are consistent, so we can kind of look at what are we doing well in, so that we know specifically maybe some areas that we need to supplement supports and to make sure kids are successful and meeting as many kids and meeting as many benchmarks as they can along the way. To a comment earlier, we are looking at sort of a blended approach. So there would be digital resources as well as handheld resources, which we do currently have anyways, but looking at things like Origo or Fosno Math, which would be more considered like the newer version of a traditional textbook, probably, with the manipulatives and things like that, and then a blended approach with some sort of digital access where kids could work at school and then also have access to it at home. So we just want to bring that forth. We are meeting January 16th with a little bit different group. We did narrow down some resources just to kind of dig in deeper and actually play with it, and more so than we can have full access, so we can get feedback from teachers and coaches, and principals have been invited to that as well too, just to give feedback if they'd like.
Bob, you know what might be helpful? You know how you and I and Ryan and Sarah talked recently at a committee meeting we had. We talked about doing an in-depth presentation of what Reader's Workshop looks like at the classroom level, and because I'm not so sure everybody knows, and I don't, when I say everybody, I don't mean board members, but I mean everybody, everybody in the community, et cetera. And there seems to be questions out there in the community. Now, again, I'm representing what I hear from non-educators. How we teach math, what we teach in math, what we use to teach in math, and is this what you're referring to? Because I'm really not sure what you're referring to when you talk about K-8 math update.
I'm not sure I followed your question completely. I think what we're at the resources that we use to
The
instruct
resources,
students.
okay, that I understand.
Yes.
I understand.
The framework and the instructional practices that go
Yes.
along, that's the other, I think that's the other piece you're
Yes,
asking about.
yes, yes.
And we are continuing to update that and grow that knowledge. We do some, what we call like these little quick meetings with with principals and coaches as far as, what does math look like K-8? What
Yes.
does literacy look like K-8? And that's what
Absolutely.
we talked, I believe, when we had our conversation, we talked about that,
Yes.
bringing that forward at some point.
Yes.
As an information or
Right.
presentation item or
That
something
would be
here.
helpful.
We
say,
could
what
do a
is-
combo with math or something
What
like
does
that.
math look like, K-8?
Yep.
What are we teaching, how are we teaching it? Because, it is different, and the approaches and the instructional methodology and the learning, and it is different, and it isn't what, 1 and 1 are 2. It's so much beyond that, that it would be interesting, I think, to discuss that.
One of the other parts that I'm working with a few instructional coaches on is a family component. What does it, so we
Yes.
can get some brochures, possibly, I'm also looking at a website to go out, so parents have a
Yes,
resource to
indeed.
kind of answer some of those questions that you brought up. What does
Indeed.
math look like? How is it taught differently now
Yes.
than how it might have been when we were going through school?
Right.
So that is definitely something, I have a meeting coming up right away on Friday. I'm hoping definitely by August of next year, we have the website, we have the brochures, everything to roll out for that math component, so families have a better understanding of how math is being taught.
Thank you, Rose, because sometimes I think the educational system, not necessarily Waukesha, but the educational system just assumes that everybody understands how we're teaching math, how we're teaching reading, and it's so vastly different than the way we were taught that I think we need to stop and explain so that people do understand, because some parents are having trouble helping their kids at home. So a parent component is real important. Thank you.
We'll have a draft of something in your hands.
Okay.
Like a sample of a grade level or two
Great.
by May for both math and literacy. It was just, I don't know what we're gonna call it necessarily, but right now, like just a parent roadmap,
Right,
so.
great. Mr. Baumgart?
But the bottom line is still, what do they learn?
Well, right.
And-
Well, of course, what do they learn?
And Rose knows this. If I have a high school senior that can't tell me what 2 tickets at $120 apiece is gonna cost without using her calculator, we're not teaching math correctly. So I will be burned on that until it's fixed. You and I have talked about that. I mean, I don't care about all the manipulatives and all the rest of that stuff that you keep talking about. Fact is, 2 times 12 is 24, period. And why don't they know that?
I agree with you 100%.
Good.
And just to
Remember that.
list,
I will remember that, absolutely.
But that could be an isolated situation, because if you look at our math scores, both elementary and secondary, they are heading in the right direction.
Good.
On our state tests.
The next time a senior comes along, I'll ask her that question.
Why, you could ask any grade.
Why are you waiting
Yeah, you don't have to wait
until
for seniors.
I was gonna say, I think you could ask some elementary students that question and they could answer it.
yeah.
I would say by
I would
fourth or
hope
fifth
so.
grade, I
Mental
would think
math,
all
yeah.
of them should. I mean,
Mental
they
math.
should
And I
be
am
able
so pleased that I have actually been in rooms and they're using flashcards again. Really?
Sure.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I said I'm pleased.
We don't do much with memory work anymore.
And just a quick question, Bob and
Rolling
Rose.
the eyes.
I know you're talking K-8, but as we
rolling
look
their
at the
eyes.
whole K-12, I was talking to some alum, and I don't know, again, I should know, but he said the best course he thought he took, because he wasn't math-oriented, so we have these requirements, and they're state requirements as well as district requirements, but he said the best math course he ever took, I don't know if it was 9th or 10th grade, and I don't know if, he called it consumer math, I'm not sure what we call it, if we even still give it, but he said, they taught me how to take a gas bill and compute the, whatever BTUs, they taught me how to compute if I'm gonna go buy a car, interest rate, and when it was all this consumer math, and he said that was the best course he ever took in math, because he wasn't gonna be an engineer, and he wasn't, do we still offer that kind of stuff in high school for kids who might like it.
I can find that out for you.
Yeah, I just thought it was an interesting conversation, and he asked me if we still offered it, and I said, I don't know, and he said, boy, I hope you do, because that was the best math course I ever took. So, I don't know.
Mr.
That
Baumgart.
does introduce a part answer to your question. Amy Lang and I have been talking about possibilities of introducing a personal finance type of a course.
Balancing a
We're
checkbook.
getting into issues about, elective or
Yeah.
and economics and all that stuff. So, but the fact is, something like that, which deals with budgets and personal checking and all that kind of
Right.
stuff, is in the smoldering stages. So
Oh, okay.
I don't know where we will be with that in a year, but,
Okay, just another question.
yeah.
I mean, I think the hope would be that a lot of that stuff would be part of the math
Oh, yeah.
over time anyways, so,
Sure.
you wouldn't necessarily need to take a specific course, but that'd be the real world application types of pieces that we'd want to have going on from all grades up, so.
Well, I guess no matter how long we go on in this world and educating young people, there's still basic skills, and the need for basic skills that will never, ever go away. They need to know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide in their head, and they certainly need to know how to unblock
Diagram
new
a
words. Pardon me?
Diagram a sentence.
Diagram, well, Barbara and I,
Diagram sentences, yeah.
Me
we
too.
hang on to certain things, don't
That's
we?
all right. Well, but Bill, it's
Okay.
true.
It's
It's
okay.
okay. There are basic skills.
They worked.
And the eyes are rolling.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our last item, there was a little question with why you have a second brochure on your desk
Yeah.
tonight. As I was reading through the Special Education Policy Manual, I thought, wait a minute, there's pages missing, and there were many, many pages missing. So I called to see if that was purposeful, but it wasn't. It was an accident. So it's been corrected. I realize this is a lot more reading than this, so it'll be, difficult to know if we would have had everything together, but proceed anyway, Joe. I'm sorry if,
Correct.
you know.
The summary that was attached gives a little bit of the rationale as to why we have to do this. It's
Yes.
required by the state and federal government
Yes,
that we have a policy and procedure manual in the district. We have had that. The last update of it was in 2008. That may sound like some time ago, but the reality is there was no real reason to make a change to that because IDEA had not been reauthorized and there were no major changes at the state. That was up until 2013, so the beginning of last school year. At that time, the school districts were required to go to the identification process for individuals with specific learning disabilities changed. We went from a discrepancy model where we compared cognitive ability and academic ability. When we put those two together, we made a decision if the child had a learning disability or not.
Right.
In 2013, that changed to a process of going through a RTI, response to intervention, using scientific research-based interventions for a given period of time with students to determine if they had been instructed properly, provided enough additional instruction, and then making a determination if they had a disability, a specific learning disability. So on pages 31 of the document and pages 37, you'll see the changes that came about as a result of this new SLD criteria.
I know a lot of this is statute-based, so here we are with the state, and I understand that, but I thought it was so interesting on page 3, and it's just maybe me, but they list orthopedic impairments, and I've never known a child with orthopedic impairments that couldn't potentially be a Stephen Hawking. And I thought, why is that in there?
Yeah, some of
Sort of
the
bizarre.
orthopedic impairments, if you were to look at, special education really is around to address a barrier to learning,
Yeah.
where you need a specialized instruction. Orthopedic impairment would most generally fall into the category of adaptive physical education. Students need to meet their FIED credits, and they need to have exposure to
Okay.
that.
That makes
And we have to sometimes so alter the FIED curriculum that students are able to participate and get a meaningful PE experience.
Okay, thank you. I mean, you think of Stephen Hawking and you think he's doing just fine. Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So this isn't really an action item in any way, shape, or
No,
form. It's
no.
just more of informational purpose
It's
for the
just what
board.
the state, what is required of school districts when they
Correct.
provide services for students having special educational needs.
Yeah.
What was my question here? Let me see. Oh, I know what it was. We do have students who have exceptional education needs who are unable to be assessed, tested like other students are, correct?
As far as state testing and such, yes.
Well, I'm thinking of the multiple handicap, profound
We-
retardation. You know, how do their assessments are different, correct? I mean, they're
Correct.
not how well a child reads or does math, et cetera, but it may be other skills like eating, right?
Sure. So if you were to think of the state assessments, the WKC, which we're all familiar with, which
Yes.
is now since gone
Yes.
away, there was always the WAA, the Wisconsin Alternate Assessment.
Yes.
The alternate assessment assessed students based off of their IEP
IEP,
goals.
right.
And the IEP goals would really be tailored to the unique needs of the
Right.
student, the unique abilities of the student.
Right, right.
And then, just to understand that in special ed, we do service a full range of students. We do have students where we're struggling to find ways to communicate. We know that there's some good thinking going on, and we can't get out what their thoughts are. We have students where we are really working at the most basic of basic skills, but we also have students that are on the other end of what would be that spectrum. Kids who have a learning disability but would fall into gifted categories in other areas.
That's right.
Struggles with reading, but gifted in the areas of math. Kids with disabilities, and I haven't been here for a full year yet, but in my prior district, we had a number of students with disabilities that would score over a 30 on the ACT, and were Madison bound, Stanford bound. So we do provide services to a full range of learners.
That's right.
in special ed.
I noticed on page 25, not of the new or revised, but the original that we got, it says, the school district of Waukesha determines if a child is a child with a disability within 60 days after receiving parental consent to evaluate, et cetera. Is that 60 school days or 60 calendar days?
It is, we try to operate in a 60 calendar day, but we do have the flexibility to look at it as a school day. Our school psychologists and diagnosticians do a fantastic job from start to finish for timelines. We recently, and I sent out, I believe it was in a weekly board update, that we completed the state self-assessment this past year. We reviewed 60 files and met timelines, I believe, in 59 of the 60. And for the one exception, it was for a specific learning disability where we were able to get an extension from the state. So we do a great job, our teams do a great job of getting kids.
Well, I recall, Joe, that sometimes students come in the middle of the school year and you know, they come from special education program, but yet we have to reevaluate, do we not?
If it's an out-of-state transfer, if it's a student who transfers in from one of our neighbors, Milwaukee Public Schools, Elmbrook, we can accept their evaluation and their IEP.
And place
place
right away,
them
or-
immediately, yes.
Immediately, okay, because I can think of a situation where a student very much transferred in and, you know, had great needs, and we were waiting and waiting for, you know, the assessment to take place, and that wasn't, you know, it was difficult for the student, and that's why the 60-day bothered me, but yes, I think, I agree with you, we're pretty good in Waukesha. In
We
fact,
do
we're
a very good job. You know, and when you think of 60 days, that does sound like a long time.
Yes, it does.
When you are administering an intervention, now, if you think about it under the specific learning disabilities, those interventions are 6 to 8 weeks in duration. So you're talking 30 to 40 days to get through one intervention. And the criteria requires that we administer 2 interventions to students. So, I mean, you think about that long timeline, but you want to make sure that it's right, because when you're placing a child in special ed, you are in fact telling that family that your child does have a disability. And you want to make sure that you're accurate and you do a thorough job of evaluation.
You know, Joe, we used to, just one more question, please.
Sure.
We used to have a vision impaired classroom in the district, and we don't anymore. Are those students receiving itinerant services? Is that how we serve them?
We just don't have the same level of need in some areas. That goes up and down. We do have students with vision impairments who are receiving services. It is more of an inclusive manner. Again, it's tailored to meet the need of the student. Again, if a child is blind but does not have any other impairment there, you know, we're looking at more of a Braille, fully inclusive experience for students that would come with a Braille list and all the assistive technologies that would be associated with that
It's
disability.
an itinerant service.
Correct. I'm not aware if we have any students who are deaf-blind. I have worked in situations where we've had students who are deaf-blind, where they can neither see nor hear, but, you know, in essence, the Helen Keller type of individual, and we are working on Braille and sign language and all the other tools that would be there for that
Well, I
person.
learned a lot about, you know, the vision impaired program because it was in my building. And I must say that several of the students were non-district students, that they were bused as far as Watertown.
Correct, and we're still doing, our deaf and hard of hearing program.
Yes, that I know we
is
are.
Is still one that we
Yeah.
are getting a number of districts that are tuitioning students into us to access those services, and we've got a phenomenal team at both the elementary and middle level to work with those students.
If I just may call the attention to, you know, we had a very successful vision program, and there were a couple of kids in there that were definitely from our school district, and I'm proud to say that one of our former students, alumni, graduated from Carroll and is now writes for the Freeman, has a weekly column. So his name is Greg, and I'm sure you see it weekly in the Freeman, and I'm very, very proud of him because he came through the vision program. Pardon me? Greg Welchman, right. And, you know, he's out and about in the community doing great things and writing for the Freeman, and he was a wonderful example of how great that program was. So you're saying we don't have anyone like that right now?
We may have students who have visual impairments.
Impairments, but
When
not-
when you're thinking of running a program,
Yeah.
if you have students at the elementary level and a large population of them, you would kind of look at that in a program model.
Right, right.
If we have a few students who are spread out K-12 across our district, you don't really look at that under the guise of a program anymore. You're really looking at specialized services because
Sure,
what a student would need at the high school would be very different than what a
Right.
student would need at the
Right.
elementary level.
But these were, you know, I would say that 50% of those students were totally blind. So, well, thank you, Joe, I really appreciate that. So I'm assuming you'll have more information forthcoming from Exceptional Education and Student Services?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Just a
Okay,
quick,
yes.
if we look on page 7, and I was thinking about Joe as I read this. Of course, this is state legalese, but this just shows what a morass you deal with, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Definition of parent.
Yeah.
And you read through that, it's like,
Yeah, and
oh
not to
my
go,
God.
you know, when you are dealing with situations, you know, what does it mean to be parent? What does it mean to
Yeah.
be guardian? We will occasionally come across a situation where there has been a parent that has not been attached to the child for many, many years. And then they will come back into the child's life and not necessarily agree with the educational program. So we do have to make sure that we respect the rights of the parents, both parents and also the child, and make sure that we're navigating that, and sometimes those can be very challenging situations to
yeah,
work
and
through.
the presumption that this person is the child's father. And then, of course, the whole Indian situation, Native American Act is very complex. That's amazing. Yeah, so, good luck.
Well, I know you're a very knowledgeable person about a very, very special population of people, so it's great working with you, Joe. Thank you. Okay, anything else that needs to come before this board this evening? Hearing none, then the meeting is adjourned.